I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capital Views. And today, welcome to Commissioner John Boyle of the Department of Natural Resources. Thanks for joining us, Commissioner.
Yeah, great to be with you, Tim.
A lot of interest this year in carbon and how to manage carbon and how to make our Alaska industries more attractive to investment because of that. You were with a group that went down to North Dakota. They are doing underground injection. And I wondered if you could maybe give us a few thoughts on what you saw there and how some of those things might be applied to Alaska.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the question. North Dakota really is one of the first movers when it's come to the carbon dioxide sequestration space. They recognized years ago that CCUS could be a great tool for their state to help protect their power generating industries, their mining industries, and enable them to sort of stay ahead at the time of what seemed to be an onslaught of governmental regulation and other activities, maybe by banks and financiers to not finance certain types of projects unless certain environmental benchmarks are made. So they really had the foresight to take advantage of EPA's Class 6 well primacy program that they delegated down to the states. And it was fascinating to see how, over the past few years, how that program has really evolved there.
Just by way of background, one of the interesting things about underground injection is that we've actually been doing this sort of thing for a long time up here. We now inject natural gas and store it underground. So this is just a different gas, but there are some differences with it. For one thing, I guess the injection through the so-called Class 6 wells is very carefully regulated by the EPA. And this is as I understand, a fairly expensive procedure to set this up. We're engaged in it now, but how?
Yeah, I would say that from a technical standpoint, there's not a lot of difference really between the types of wells that inject carbon dioxide underground, for instance, from wells that inject natural gas underground, which, as you pointed out, we've been doing on the North Slope for nearly 50 years now, right? And a large percent of that gas on the North Slope does contain carbon dioxide. So in effect, Alaska is already very experienced when it comes to cycling these materials, but it is regulated under Class 6 under the EPA, which falls under the Safe Drinking Water Act to ensure that these kinds of activities don't interfere with potable water reservoirs. But in North Dakota, I think what we've seen is that the federal tax credits that are available under Section 45Q are really providing the financial impetus or incentives for companies to look at implementing this technology. Because as you pointed out, it's not free. It costs money to utilize and change your industrial processes to capture CO2. And then, of course, how far you have to transport that captured CO2 to where it can be injected underground can have a big impact on the cost and financial implications associated with utilizing the technology.
Commissioner, in North Dakota, do you, I mean, they're doing this now. Did you see some examples of what sort of industries were taking advantage of this? How are they generating the CO2 and how are they transporting it?
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to visit sort of an industrial complex where they had both an ethanol plant that was in close proximity to a major coal-fired power plant, and which was also adjacent to a corn drying facility associated with, creating animal feed. And so at the ethanol plant, they already have CCUS in place, where at the emission stack, they have equipment that captures the CO2, and it was very interesting to kind of see it run through the pipes in the system, so to speak. And as it's captured there, it was piped about maybe a mile or two away, where there was an injection well set up that's now injecting that captured CO2 from the ethanol plant underground. We had an opportunity to visit that site. And then as we visited the coal-fired power plant that was adjacent to the ethanol plant, that's a 1,200 megawatt plant. And they are in the process now of designing the CCUS system around that I think they hope to see implemented here within the next year or two.
And in case of the coal plant, this would be using a technology that captures the CO2 as the emissions go up the stack?
That's
and then
correct.
redirecting the emissions underground. Is this something that sounds like something we could do in Alaska?
Absolutely, right? As we all know, Alaska has an immense quantity of coal. And not only do we have a lot of coal, but it's clean coal, right? It lacks sulfur, it lacks a lot of the heavy metals that can make coal problematic in a lot of other areas. And so when you look or you contemplate the opportunities that are associated with implementing state-of-the-art coal-fired power plant technology, which in and of itself finds efficiencies with scrubbers and other things that take a lot of the bad stuff more or less out of the flue gas. You couple that with CCUS technology that would capture the carbon and potentially sequester that underground. And all of a sudden you have an energy source that's clean, that's environmentally responsible, that could theoretically be implemented here. And I'll just point out that the cost of the coal-fired power that's being generated in North Dakota was around 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So you can only imagine being able to implement those types of utility rates across the state would provide a tremendous benefit for all of our utility ratepayers.
That's very interesting. Is the there's some discussion of a new coal-fired power plant in western Matsu Valley near Squintina. And I know your department, this is now in the exploration phase, I gather. But the concept would be a plant there would generate power into a power lines, regional power lines, but also would be transporting the CO2 they would capture to back to Anchorage, um, or back to Cook Inlet for sequestration. So, is this? Do you know much about this? How far along they are in their project?
Yeah, I know the project is in its preliminary sort of design or scoping phase, right? We're pre-feed, where they're looking through kind of the technical and economic viability of the project. But really what any project developer would be looking for is obviously siting a coal generating facility that's, one, both close to the source of the coal, and then two, also relatively close to where that coal can be, or where the carbon captured from that coal-fired power plant could be sequestered. So as you look to the Susitna Valley and those reservoirs that extend up from the Cook Inlet, there is a lot of opportunity there to potentially co-locate a generating facility and have sequestration be able to take place at the site, which would be a key element to making CCUS economic with a project of that size and scope.
Well, interesting. There's a lot yet to come. And Commissioner, we want to thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's always great to talk with you.